Unbelievable moment. Cop slaps black man in court, not knowing he's the chief judge revealed. Mark Thompson stood in the courtroom, a palpable tension hanging thick in the air. He felt the weight of every gaze upon him, a crowd of faces that saw only a black man, disregarding the layers of his identity. Little did they know, he was about to challenge the very foundation of the injustice they so frequently ignored. Just moments ago he had taken the brave step forward, ready to testify about the brutal act. He had witnessed a moment that had shattered not just his world, but his community. As he began to recount the details, doubts crept in, but his commitment burned brightly. He thought of his children, Kai and Lila, their innocent faces lighting up his life, and how fiercely he wanted to protect them from the struggles he had faced. He recalled the countless students he had mentored, helping to navigate their way through an educational maze riddled with economic hardships. He believed in hard work and dignity. Mark knew he had to stand up for what's right. Suddenly, the chaotic scene erupted. An officer, clearly rattled and defensive, struck him across the face like a sudden thunderclap. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Shock was painted on every face. The ripple effect was immediate. Anger surged like a tidal wave as the community, witnessing this act, felt a spark ignite within their collective heart. The very air crackled with indignation. This was no longer just Mark's fight, it was theirs. The panic in Mark's mind wrestled with the pride swelling in his chest. Standing off to the side, his wife, Angela, grappled with her emotions, a tangled mix of support and fear swirling within her. She had dedicated herself to being Mark's partner in every fight, but watching the chaos unfold, doubt seeped in. What if this was the moment that everything turned upside down? Their children, too young to truly grasp the stakes, sensed the shift, and their innocent questions about their father's role in the spectacle only placed heavier burdens on Mark's heart. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The courtroom began to rumble as conversations erupted, some in disbelief and others in outrage. Mark felt that intense heat rising within him, the kind that could burn down walls or build them anew. He was at a crossroads. He no longer stood merely as a father or a professor but as a beacon of hope for a weary community. Empowered by the fury of the crowd and the love of his family, Mark squared his shoulders. The officer's blow had been a ripple. What would it take to create a tidal wave? He was determined to turn this moment into a movement. This wasn't just about one man standing up, it was about a community reclaiming their place, their battles, their dignity. The gavel fell, silence reigned, and Mark felt the weight of hope and fear coalesce within him. Would he find the strength to challenge both the officer and the systemic failure that had allowed this injustice? In the hushed courtroom where hearts raced with anticipation, Mark stood poised to redefine not just his own fate, but the fate of his community. Would he rise to the challenge, or would doubt rob them of the progress they longed to achieve? Mark's heart pounded in his chest as he locked eyes with the officer who had struck him. The anger radiating from the crowd felt like fuel against the chill of fear creeping in. It was a moment where time felt elastic, stretching out as the fury of the crowd surged around him. He could see the faces of his neighbors, people he'd grown up with, people he'd once taught. They were standing there unified, ready for change, but unsure how the next act would play out. Enough! Mark's voice bellowed over the noise. It wasn't just a shout, it was a call to arms. As he took a step forward, the courtroom fell silent, leaving only the sound of his steady breath. Mark felt a surge of purpose. This was it. No turning back. I am here for my community. I am here for every single face in this room. That spark of fierce determination ignited a wave of murmurs. Heads nodded, fists tightened. Each heartbeat synchronized with the resonance of his words. Then, the voice of the prosecutor cut through the tension. Your Honor, the attorney's expression was caught between disbelief and indignation. This is an outrage. We cannot allow this man to taint the proceedings with his nonsense. You think I care about your title? Mark retorted, his eyes narrowing. This isn't just about a slap. It's about generations of injustice, generations of silence. Today we speak out. The crowd erupted in a chorus of agreement. They were no longer just bystanders in a courtroom. They were participants in a battle for the soul of their community. Mark could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, filling him with the courage to challenge everything he had ever feared. With every ounce of strength, Angela stood with him, whispering fiercely, "You've got this, Mark." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears but were also brimming with unwavering support. It made all the difference. He wasn't alone. Mark turned back to the prosecutor, who now appeared visibly shaken. "You want to keep pretending things are okay?" he asked, thrusting a finger toward the officer, still perched behind his desk, looking more vulnerable than he had moments before. "You slap me like I'm less than human and you expect me to sit down and shut up?" This was a truth moment. Across the courtroom, the audience gripped one another, friends, family, allies. They understood the gravity of his words. This wasn't merely a legal issue. It was a reflection of a society that often failed to see their full humanity. What if we all stood up? Mark challenged. What if we refused to accept this mockery of justice? What if we refused to be invisible? He could see in their faces. A ripple of realization ignited, hope mingling with outrage began to take hold. Each small voice joining into one melodious roar of determination, emboldening him. Where there had once been uncertainty, there was now clarity. As all eyes turned to Mark, he could feel something shifting not just within himself, but within the courthouse walls, as if the very foundation had begun to tremble under the weight of their collective voices. But just as the tide seemed to turn, an unexpected sound echoed off the courtroom walls. A heavy thud, a crash of something more powerful than just voices, something darker. The door creaked open, revealing two figures clad in black, approaching with purpose. All eyes snapped toward them and Mark's pulse quickened. Who were they? What did they want? Their demeanor chilled the air around him, and a new wave of apprehension swept over the room, cutting through the moment of triumph. Mark wasn't prepared for this. Not now. Not when hope was so close. Would they stand in solidarity, or would they play the role of the opposition? The room stirred restlessly, collective uncertainty blossoming as the figures drew nearer. What was their next move? Mark's heart raced as he braced for whatever came next. Would the strength of their community hold? Or would fear tear them apart? The two figures moved with a confidence that sent ripples of dread through the crowd. Their black uniforms seemed to absorb the dim light of the courtroom, casting an imposing shadow that enveloped everything around them. Murmurs spread like wildfire, igniting disbelief and trepidation. Mark's stomach knotted as he recognized one of them, a detective from the local precinct. Someone he'd often seen on the news, always assuring the public that justice was served. "What's happening?" someone whispered from the back, their voice trembling. Mark's mind raced. The moment they walked in, it was clear this wasn't just about him anymore. It felt bigger, as if they were now facing an oppressive force that sought not merely to intimidate, but to silence the very spirit of the community. The detective approached the prosecutor, whispering something that made the attorney's face flush with indignation. Mark felt the pulse of the crowd, the fear mingling with defiance. He couldn't let it unravel. "Not now. Get back," Mark shouted, stepping forward as he felt a wave of protection swell inside him. "This is our space. You can't come in here and dictate our rights." All eyes shifted back to him, a glint of recognition passing through the crowd. He was a teacher, a neighbor, but at that moment he was their voice. He could see Angela gripping her father's arm. Her expression hardened with resolve, reflecting a determination he hadn't seen before. Other faces mirrored hers, fierce and unwavering. "Mark," Angela's voice trailed off, filled with both concern and pride. "Be careful." He turned, searching for her reassurance, and gave a small nod. With Angela at his side, he felt that long-sought courage flooding back, the kind that pushed them to fight back against a system designed to crush like a boot on a flower. What came next was like the flicker of a match in a darkened room. "This is not just your trial," the detective spoke, hand resting pointedly on the prosecutor's desk. "This is a matter of maintaining order. You should know your place, Mark, considering your past." The words landed like stones in water, rippling through the crowd. A murmur of disagreement rose. Faces hardened, fists clenched. Mark felt their energy. The solidarity was alive. A fire ready to ignite at the wrong spark. Order. Mark scoffed, taking a step closer to the detective. You think this is about order? This is about the chaos you've created in our community. You think I'm afraid of you? I know my rights and I know my worth. Suddenly the heavy room felt electric. People leaned in, energized by his boldness. It was as if Mark was channeling the fury of years of oppression, of voices unheard. The crowd's resolve galvanized, uniting under a single banner of justice. Today we demand justice, Mark continued, his voice rising above the clamor. We will not be silenced by the likes of you. The officer's gaze narrowed, and for a moment Mark thought he saw doubt flicker behind the bravado. A distant siren wailed outside, echoing the urgency of the moment. Would they call for backup? Would this be the end? Suddenly, Angela stepped beside him, her eyes ablaze. And we're not alone, she shouted, raising her voice as if summoning the spirits of those who had stood before them. A swell of voices erupted, drowning out fear with shouts of solidarity, each one bolstering the other. This wasn't just a statement, it was a movement, a fight for their lives, their dignity. But the tension hung thick in the air. What would the figures in black do next? Mark's heart raced. He was prepared to stand his ground, ready for whatever was to come. Would it shift the power in the room? Or would they face backlash that pushed them back into silence? The moment stretched, thick with anticipation. The air felt electric, laden with resolve and fear, both tethered to the weight of their collective strength. What would they choose to do next? Where was their final stand? The detective's eyes flickered around the room, landing on one familiar face after another. Calculation etched across his features. Was he sizing them up? Mark kept his stance firm, refusing to waver as he locked eyes with the imposing figure before him. The crowd's energy surged, but so did the tension. A battle of wills was brewing, and he could feel it palpably, almost like a physical current in the air. The prosecutor stepped forwards, his face taut with anger. This is a courtroom, not a rally, he barked, trying to regain control over the chaos. Order must be order, Mark interrupted, his voice unyielding and full of fire. You mean silence? You think your unjust system can keep us quiet? Not anymore. This is our moment. The words hung in the room, palpable and charged. He couldn't tell who was more surprised, him or the detective. The crowd echoed his defiance with shouts of agreement, the sound washing over him like a wave. Mark had harnessed something powerful. Angela squeezed his hand tightly, her expression a cocktail of worry and breathtaking admiration. He could see emotions playing across her father's face, too, pride and fear warring within him. This was more than a trial now. It was a fight not only for Mark but for everyone who ever felt crushed under the weight of authority. Every person who had dared to speak up yet found their voice choked out by the system. Do you really believe this is the way to go? The detective scoffed, trying to regain the upper hand. You think we fear you, Mark? You're nothing but a ticking clock waiting to run out. Mark took a deep breath, summoning more strength. You don't get it, he responded, unwavering. This isn't about me. It's about the people you've oppressed. This is bigger than you can even fathom. Suddenly, from behind, a voice rose above the rest. It was a woman near the back, Sarah, a local shopkeeper. Mark, they've crossed a line. We're done being silent. We'll fight for you. Cheers erupted, filling the courtroom with a sound that thrummed like a heartbeat, alive and relentless. Mark felt the power of that moment wash over him, igniting something fierce in his chest. It was as if he were not just leading his community. They were now a collective force, unstoppable in their demands for dignity and justice. But then, just as the momentum swelled, the detective stepped forward, his face an unreadable mask now. You think you're rising up? You have no idea who you're really tackling. This will end badly for you. There was an edge to his voice, a threat hidden behind the facade of professionalism. An uneasy silence settled over the crowd as the detective continued, Mark, don't force my hand. I'd hate for someone to get hurt today. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. Would they resort to violence? 1,000 faces turned to him, waiting for his next move. The weight of their hope rested heavily on his shoulders. Angela's grip tightened. Mark, you don't have to do this. We can walk away now, he said, shaking his head resolutely. We stand together. We will not be pushed around. Then, with renewed determination, he raised his voice once more. "Who's with me? Are we going to let them walk all over us? Or are we going to show them our strength?" The crowd erupted again, rising up like a force of nature, shaking the very foundations of that courtroom. Mark realized in that moment it wasn't just about him retaking control, it was a sea of voices refusing to be muted, a unity and defiance that he had never witnessed before. But just as victory seemed within grasp, he noticed a flash of movement on the side, the detective signaling to someone, a glint of metal catching the light. Mark's heart sank. He sensed the shift, a wave of dread creeping in like fog. What would happen next? Would their unity be enough? Or would they face the repercussions of challenging authority? The tension thickened and Mark felt time slowing as they prepared for the next phase of the battle ahead. Would they rise together? Or would they fall apart? A tense hush fell over the crowd as the detective's signal slashed through the air. Mark's heart raced, adrenaline pumping in his veins. The glint of metal became clearer, and panic rippled through the room like a gust of wind, sharp, unsettling. His gaze shot to Angela. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear but also with unyielding support. She believed in him, and in that heartbeat, Mark knew he had to protect her and everyone else gathered there. His voice rang out steady and fierce, "We will stand together." But the detective was not just playing a game. He was launching a direct threat now. A second figure emerged from the shadows, an officer, hand resting on the butt of a service weapon. Authorities stood armed and prepared to silence them swiftly if need be. The crowd's fervor was met with danger, and fear twisted the emotions in the courtroom. "Stay back," the detective barked, his voice slicing through the tense atmosphere. It felt as though the weight of their uprising was being pulled taut like a string ready to snap. Mark lifted his chin defiantly, channeling the raw energy in the room. This was no time to back down. "Do you want to fight?" Sarah called out, her voice unwavering as she confronted the officer, embodying the spirit of determination that echoed in others as well. "We're not afraid of you." Her boldness ignited something fierce in the crowd. They began to shout again, a rallying cry rising from the depths of their souls. Mark felt hope surge through him. Was this how change began? Would they find strength in their unity, even knowing the risks? As if sensing the shift, the detective's posture became tense, calculating each move. Mark took a moment to scan the faces around him. They were scared but fierce, their determination palpable. He felt the power of their shared struggle echoing in his heart. Mark stepped forward, willing to be the face of their fight. "Listen to me," he shouted, raising his voice to break through the chaos. "You think you can intimidate us? You think that uniforms give you power over our lives? You're wrong." His words resonated deep in the hearts of his supporters, rippling through the audience. The officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the detective, as if a conflict loomed between them two. It was a moment of hesitation, a crack in their bravado. The fear in their eyes suggested doubt, a painful realization that Mark would not back down. Angela squeezed his hand tighter. She could feel his energy radiating, making the air around them electric. "You can't silence us," she whispered fiercely, and Mark drew strength from her. Then, just as the thoughts of victory illuminated a spark of possibility, the detective's words cut through the air again. "You have no idea what's coming. You're just making it worse for all of you." His tone was foreboding, dark with unspoken threats. But Mark felt a choice ripple through the crowd, an unexpected clarity. They had two paths laid out before them. One that led to defeat in silence, or one that risked it all to stand up. "We are ready to face whatever comes," he declared, determination resonating in every syllable. The crowd roared back, a chorus of voices rising to meet his energy, their hearts beating in sync. The sound filled the corners of the courtroom, raw and wild. It was more than just noise. It was a proclamation of their unity. As they pushed against the barrier of fear, Mark felt a momentary glimpse of a future beyond intimidation. But deep down, he sensed that the real confrontation awaited just outside the courtroom doors, where the stakes became even higher. And then he spotted movement, more officers converging outside, ominous shadows readying for action. Would they try to break their spirit? Would this collective force hold strong? Mark's resolve solidified. The time for wavering was over. He had become their leader. "What are we willing to risk?" he thought, heart pounding. "What does it really mean to fight for change?" The next chapter would demand more from them all, and Mark could feel the question lingering in the air, heavier than any threat. The tide was turning, and the next moments would determine everything. Would they hold the line or be forced to retreat? Mark's heart pounded as he sensed the air shift. Outside the courtroom, the sound of boots on the marble floor echoed ominously. He scanned the crowd, their faces a mix of fear and determination. His fingers interlaced with Angela's, grounding him in that moment. "Stay strong, everyone," Mark bellowed, determination bolstering his voice. The words rolled through the courtroom, echoing off the walls, reinforcing their collective spirit. It was as if he could feel the power radiating from the crowd back to him, feeding his courage. His gaze darted to the glass doors at the back of the room. Shadows danced beyond the threshold, officers lined up, ready to charge in. He could almost hear the thudding of his heart drowning out other sounds, the tension thick enough to slice. The detective's warning loomed in his mind: "You have no idea what's coming." But for now they had no choice but to stand their ground. One of the officers, a young man, shifted restlessly, glancing back at his superior. Mark sensed a crack in their armor. He had to drive home the reality that they weren't just a mob of fearful citizens. They were empowered individuals, fighting for what was right. "Every one of you matters," he yelled, locking eyes with as many faces as he could. "This isn't just about today, it's about our future. We will not be silenced." The crowd responded, voices rising in a crescendo, drowning out the impending threat. No more fear. No more silence. Each chant was a torch, igniting the room with hope. As the police pressed against the doors, Mark caught a flicker of movement in the back. An older gentleman, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. He pushed his glasses up on his nose and raised a steady hand. "I am Judge Lee," he proclaimed, his voice strong. "And I will not allow this to continue." Mark's breath hitched. Did he just say what he thought he said? The atmosphere shifted again, tension edging into confusion. The crowd murmured. Whispers rippled like waves crashing against a shore. "Judge?" One person called out, incredulity lacing their voice. The murmurs grew louder. "Step aside, Judge," the detective replied curtly, now glaring at Judge Lee. "This is no place for..." But the judge held up a hand, silencing him. "No, detective. This is precisely the place for justice and accountability." His presence alone radiated authority, a phenomenon that immediately quelled the officer's advance. Mark felt a reinsurgence of hope. The courage of this judge was palpable, weaving through the sea of fear in the room. "Together we can take back our power," he shouted, rallying just as much for the judge's resolve as for the crowd's unity. The courtroom was electric now, adrenaline crackling in the air. "Are you all with us?" Judge Lee asked, his voice carrying firm weight. The crowd erupted, fists pumped high, the solidarity dangerous and fierce. But before victory could settle into their hearts, a loud crash came from outside the doors. The officers were pushing harder, their purpose clear. The confrontation they dreaded was at hand. Angela squeezed Mark's hand tighter, eyes brimming with both fear and resolve. "We can't back down, can we?" "No," he said breathlessly, cradling her gaze with his. "We're in this together." As the doors slammed open, officers spilling into the courtroom with an energy that screamed confrontation, Mark felt the chilling question slice through the air. Would they stand their ground, or would the forces of authority break this tide of rebellion? The moment had come. Would they rise against the storm, or would they be swept away? The doors burst open with a shuddering force, and chaos erupted. Officers surged in, their uniforms stark against the courtroom's polished wood and marble. Mark's breath caught in his throat. It felt as if time slowed, stretching the moment into an eternity. The sight of the officers, shields gleaming under the harsh lights, crashed against the collective hope that filled the room moments ago. "Everyone stay calm," Judge Lee directed, holding his ground. His serene composure stood in stark contrast to the escalating tension. Mark admired him, a rock amidst a raging storm, but doubt crept in. Would the judge's authority be enough to quell this impending violence? "Move aside, Judge," a burly officer barked, stepping forward with aggressive strides. The police force seemed to be a wall closing in, intent on silencing the uprising they viewed as a threat. Angela's grip tightened around Mark's fingers, white-knuckled in fear. "What do we do?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the shouting officers. "Stick together," Mark replied, his voice steady despite the chaos. "If we stay united, we can face them." The crowd behind him surged forward, drawn by collective determination. They edged closer to Judge Lee, a wave of solidarity forming like a shield against impending force. "We won't back down," someone yelled, echoing their unyielding spirit. The room vibrated with their defiance. It was electric and fierce. Suddenly, before anyone could react, an officer lunged forward. His hand shot out, aiming a backhand at Judge Lee. The sound of flesh meeting flesh rang out, a brutal slap that punctuated the air like a gunshot. It stunned everyone into silence. Mark's heart raced. "No," he shouted, pushing through the crowd, instinct kicking in. The unity they had built with their chants and hope shattered in an instant, leaving anger and disbelief. The officer's action was reckless, a display of unbridled authority. Judge Lee staggered for a moment but quickly regained his footing. His eyes were blazing, filled with outrage tempered by the weight of responsibility. "You will regret that," he warned, his voice low and steady. The vulnerability Mark had briefly sensed was replaced by a fierce resolve radiating from the judge. The crowd stirred, confusion morphing into a collective uproar. "How dare you?" came a woman's voice from the back, fueled by indignation. In that moment, the courtroom transformed from a battleground of individual fears into a fortress of shared resolve. Mark felt a fire igniting within him. "This isn't just about him," he yelled, pointing toward the judge, whose dignity had not faltered amidst the humiliation. "It's about every one of us." Rallied by Mark's call, the crowd picked up his energy. No more violence. No more intimidation. They roared, voices entwining into a storm of resistance. The officer who had struck Judge Lee hesitated, glancing nervously at his partners, a crack in their previously solid formation. Mark could see it. Even the bravest couldn't stand against the unity of the crowd for long. But just as their voices gained strength, a new voice echoed from the back, a menacing one. "You think this is a game?" The detective from before, his tone cold and dismissive, stepped into full view. "You're all going to regret this." The tension thickened. Mark's stomach twisted. Regret was the last thing he wanted to feel today. It coursed through him not just for himself, but for all those standing with Judge Lee. With the fate of the courtroom hanging in the balance, Mark had to make a choice. Would he push forward, putting everything on the line? Or would he hold back, uncertain of the consequences? Together he whispered to Angela, heart pounding, knowing they were at a critical juncture. Would they forge their destiny, or would fear pull them under? The crowd held its breath, waiting for his next move. A crackle of uncertainty zipped through the air as Mark faced the crowd, their eyes glued to him. It was a moment that felt surreal, as if all of reality had paused just for him. He could almost feel their heartbeats sync with his anticipation mixed with fear. The detective's words echoed in his mind, a chilling reminder of the stakes at hand. "Mark," Angela urged, her voice breaking through the haze of adrenaline. "What do we do?" He couldn't falter. "Not now." A surge of warmth spread through him as he looked at her, her fear piercing his resolve like an arrow. He had to be the voice they needed, the leader they hadn't expected. He raised his arms, calling for silence. The crowd looked to him, eyes wide, faces painted with desperation and hope. "Listen to me." His voice was steady, yet it shook with the weight of their collective fear. "We are here because we believe in justice. We believe in standing up against oppression, and we will not let intimidation tear us apart." A murmur rippled through the crowd, gathering strength as it passed. Had they really come together to fight against disrespect? Mark glanced at Judge Lee, who stood tall and unyielding. The judge's presence had ignited a fire in everyone's chest, and it was spreading. "Back down? Never!" shouted a voice from the front. It was a middle-aged man with graying hair, shaking with rage. "We deserve justice. This is our right." The officer who had struck the judge bristled, looking back at his fellow officers for support. The unity of the crowd was beginning to fracture their confidence, and that uncertainty was palpable. Mark seized the chance. "You can stand beside us or against us, but either way you will hear our voices." He felt sheer determination bubbling in his chest as the crowd swelled behind him, chanting loudly now, each voice a testament to their unity. Justice for all. Justice for all. The detective shifted uncomfortably at the back of the hall. Mark noticed it, the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. The officer's bravado was faltering. I can't believe you all think you can win this, he attempted, but doubt laced his words. The crowd roared louder, fueled by the undeniable strength of their collective will. It was electric as the noise enveloped the room. The burly officer who had struck the judge took a step forward, chest puffed up, trying to regain control. You all need to disperse. This is not a protest. It's a disruption. Mark couldn't help himself. He stepped forward, meeting the officer's gaze. A disruption to what? To your tyranny? We are fighting for truth. For the right to be heard. And you intend to silence us? Not today. His heart raced as the air crackled with emotion, the crowd swaying as one behind him. For a moment he felt invincible. Together they could shift the tides of injustice. Together they could make a difference. But just when their energy peaked, Judge Lee raised his hand, silencing the crowd once more. All eyes were on him as he faced the officer who had struck him. With a calmness that belied the storm of emotions around him, he spoke, voice steady. You've made your point, officer. But the line you crossed today is not just against me. It's against every principle we uphold in this court. Mark held his breath as he waited for the judge's next words. Would he instill fear or courage? As the tension thickened, he hoped beyond hope for an answer that would unite them all, sealing their fates in the fight for what was right. Suddenly, the judge unbuttoned his coat, stepping down from the dais. If it's a fight you want, let us show them what courage looks like. Mark's heart raced again. What would happen next? Would this be the turning point? Or would fear reignite the chaos? The room fell silent, the tension coiling tighter as Judge Lee stepped forward. Mark felt the weight of anticipation in the air. This was no ordinary moment. It was historic. The judge's eyes flashed with resolve, daring anyone to challenge his authority again. The officers, entrenched in their ideology, had not anticipated this. Show them courage? The burly officer spat, disbelief pouring from his lips. You think they'll listen to a judge who got smacked around? The crowd inhaled sharply. Mark felt the shift. The energy of fear mingled with fury. Yet there was a flicker of hope. If Judge Lee could stand his ground, maybe everyone else could, too. Courage isn't the absence of fear, the judge replied, calm and firm. It's standing up when it feels impossible. His voice strengthened with each word, weaving its way through the crowd, bolstering their spirits. Mark stepped up beside the judge, feeling the surge of unity wrap around him like a warm blanket. We're all tired of being silenced. We want our justice served. Together. The chant grew once more, echoing off the walls, vibrating with conviction. Murmurs of agreement rose within the crowd. Together. Together. The burly officer, faced with the judge's defiance and the crowd's growing fervor, felt cornered. There was no need for force. He needed to defuse the situation, and yet his pride clawed at him. You don't understand what you're doing. This could end badly for all of you. But Mark stepped forward, shaking with anger and passion. You think your threats scare us? You've underestimated who we are. We're families, workers, students, and neighbors. We are more than the sum of our fears. The officer faltered, realizing he was losing control. Around him, his fellow officers shifted uneasily, looking to each other for direction. Mark caught a glimpse of doubt in their eyes, a crack in the facade of bravado. In that moment, the judge took a step closer to the officers, his voice dropping to a more pressing volume. What these people are asking for is basic decency. We're not here to beg for our rights. They're ours by nature. You may believe you're the law, but today we're asking you to remember what it means to serve justice, not to suppress it. His words were a hammer hitting the anvil of the officer's resolve. Mark could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the crowd vibrating with a shared heartbeat, willing to hold the ground. And then the unexpected happened. Another officer, younger, with uncertainty etched on his face, stepped forward. What if we listen? He said, almost hesitantly. Maybe we can figure something out. A ripple of disbelief spread through the crowd. Could they be turning? Mark searched the crowd, seeing hope reflect back in Angela's eyes. Exactly, Angela shouted, jumping into the fray. This isn't about resistance. It's about communication. About mutual respect. Suddenly, the burly officer lunged forward, anger flaring in his eyes. This isn't a negotiation. But could it be? Mark's heart raced as the moment hung heavy. Would they continue this confrontation? Or could they find common ground? Would the fight against oppression become a dialogue instead of a battle? The room swirled with unspoken possibilities, and Mark could feel his heart pounding as he stood on the precipice of change. The judge's determination filled him, but doubt lingered at the edges as the crowd fell silent once more, awaiting the next move from both sides. Mark realized this confrontation would define them all. Would courage win out? As uncertainty loomed, the future teetered on a delicate balance, waiting for someone to tip the scales. What would that next step be? And then it happened. The moment shifted dramatically. Mark felt the heavy weight of the crowd's anticipation, the tense silence wrapping around them like a thick fog. The air was electric, charged with potential. "Let us talk," Judge Lee said, stepping forward with an air of authority that demanded attention. The younger officer, who had shown a glimpse of vulnerability, nodded tentatively, opening a pathway for dialogue. "But we do it together. United. No more sides." Mark felt hope pulse through the crowd like a heartbeat. The burly officer bristled, but as the room held its breath, the young officer took a deep breath, his voice softer now. "What if we heard your concerns? Maybe we can find something here beyond this chaos." Mark's heart raced. This wasn't just a chance for them. It was a chance for everyone outside this courtroom to understand. "You're right," he said, stepping forward, feeling the warmth of Angela's hand squeeze his, giving him strength and grounding him in this pivotal moment. "We're tired of fear. We're tired of being dismissed. We need action, not just words." He glanced at the faces around him, neighbors, friends, mentors, people with stories of pain and resilience. "We want to reclaim our dignity." The crowd began to murmur in agreement, a steady hum that built with every heartbeat. Mark recognized the looks in their eyes. It was the same glint in Angela's, a reflective fire of determination. "Can you speak for those outside?" the younger officer asked, drawing in a brave breath. "Show us what united looks like?" Mark took another step, his resolve solidifying. "Yes," he replied earnestly. "Starts with respect. It starts with acknowledging our experiences. We wear the same skin. We live in the same community. Let us find common ground." The crowd erupted, voices soaring into an empowering chorus. "Yes, yes, yes." Suddenly, the burly officer interjected, "But what if sharing means admitting we've made mistakes?" The raw honesty took Mark by surprise, but he welcomed it. "Admitting fault doesn't mean weakness," Mark replied. "It's strength wrapped in accountability. That's courage. The real fight is against injustice, not each other. Only together can we forge the change our community needs." And in that moment, something shifted dramatically. Faces in the crowd softened. Where anger had once lurked now lay a glimmer of understanding. Mark felt it, the cathartic release of years of pent-up frustration melding into a willingness to move forward. Judge Lee nodded. "This courtroom's fabric is woven by every voice here. It's time we ensure the threads of dignity and justice pattern our future." The detective standing at the back, who had remained eerily quiet, now stepped forward. "I was only doing my job," he admitted, his voice cracking. "But I can't hide behind that anymore. If we mean to keep order, then let us hold ourselves to higher standards." Mark's chest swelled with hope. "Exactly. You're all a part of this community. Let us lead by example. Recommit to understanding, not just policing." Suddenly, the atmosphere felt lighter, unraveling years of tension. Many officers shifted on their feet, exchanging glances, connections forming among humans instead of titles. "We can't create change without collaboration," the young officer said, gaining momentum. "We need to establish channels, community forums, discussions. Let us learn from one another." "Yes," Angela shouted, her spirit infectious. "Let communities shape policies and build dynamics that actually represent us. Let us turn this simmering anger into a resource for good," Mark urged, his voice steady as steel. "If we are willing to listen and learn from one another today, together, we can create paths forward that hadn't existed before." Mark felt teardrops, unexpected but pure, illuminative tears of joy, basin-like, filled with hope around him as the crowd swelled in support. Yes, changes were possible, but only here, only now. A tentative hand stretched forward, an officer, stepping into community ground. "We'll try," he offered, vulnerability marking his words as the crowd collectively gasped in surprise. Reverberating applause erupted in the room, a powerful response that hung in the air like euphoric music. The echoes of their united voices blended, a magnificent tapestry of hope and willingness to forge a new future together. The fight hadn't vanished, but Mark saw a flicker of change. They had transformed conflict into communication, shifting the trajectory of their community's journey. Tears brimmed in his eyes as he locked eyes with Angela, understanding that they were standing on the threshold of profound progress. Hand in hand, they stepped forward as champions of change, not just for their community but as a beacon for others who dared to rise. Mark embraced a burgeoning belief. They would strive onward. Together, as voices of the people resonated through the courtroom, it became clear the struggle for justice wasn't over, but the foundation toward change had been fortified by courage, faith, and unity. They finally begun to hold their power, cheering one another on, as they transformed fragile hopes into tangible realities. "Join us in this journey," Mark thought, bursting with emotion, knowing every heart should feel this unity. The battle for dignity had become the bridge toward understanding. A legacy of resilience was born anew, and with this they inspired hope not just for their own existence, but for a future that truly reflected everyone's worth. Now was the time to support one another, demand respect, own their stories, and make history together. This was just the beginning. Join us, support this movement, and let us stand together. Hit subscribe now, leave a like to boost our voices. Comment below with your reflections on this powerful transformation, and share this video with 5 friends who need to feel this inspiration today. It's time for everyone to rise.